that created this fiasco with 15 years of toxic assets and bogus derivatives. What's going to happen eventually, obviously, is the counterparty derivatives are going to come to the market. And we're going to wind up with another collapse just like we had last September. Only this time, it will be the final collapse because there's no more money left to bail anybody out. It's all been issued and printed. And again, folks, remember, what they've done with this bailout is give money to these crooked institutions like Goldman Sachs and Robert Rubin's Citibank and allow them basically to trade world markets and enrich themselves while they're not loaning a dime to the American people, are they, Stu?
No, they aren't. And Tom, you're touching on this collapse. Can you touch on the Chinese equation to this in the past week?
Well, the Chinese have demanded that $12 trillion that was missing from the Chinese Treasury be returned to them. You got to remember, folks, the Chinese have been a major financial backer of the United States for many years. They've loaned us money. They've supported our bond market. They've done a lot of things that have basically given the United States the ability to run up debt.
They've also supported the entire war in Iraq and Afghanistan as well. Isn't that true?
Pardon?
They basically bought the bonds, the treasuries, to support the war in Iraq.
That's correct. And there is a general feeling now that the Chinese are ready to dump our bonds. And, of course, if they do that, Stu, they will collapse the entire U.S. financial system within not 24 hours, not 6 hours, not even 1 hour, within 30 seconds. Let me repeat that. Within 30 seconds. We are not dealing...
Go ahead, Tom.
We're dealing with a crisis of unspeakable proportion, and that's one of the reasons Geithner is constantly on his way to China. We now know that there was duplicate U.S. currency issued on these offshore trading platforms with the same serial numbers showing up in North Korea, Iraq, Pakistan, and India. And, of course, it's interesting that they hide this money in India and Pakistan because it's the same place where alleged Al-Qaeda have their secret hiding places for their money. And, of course, Al-Qaeda, the alleged terrorist group, and Al-Qaeda, when defined into English, is basically the database of U.S. government employees going back to the 1990s when they worked for the Mujahideen and Osama bin Laden, who were employees of the United States. By the way, bin Laden's been dead 8 years. His real name is Tim Osman. And Al-Qaeda is nothing more than a massive patsy. They had very little to do with 9/11 at all. But what I did want to get back to here is the theft of these funds from the Chinese Treasury. This was all accomplished through the insiders that were placed, let's say, close to the Chinese government, or if not inside the Chinese government. A stooge of Hillary Clinton named Madam Wu. And, of course, Madam Wu was a bagman for the Bushes and Clintons. And what they were able to do is they were able to move a lot of these funds out of China through duplicitous trading activity, utilizing North Korea. The funds were then laundered back through the Deutsche Bank and then showed up at Goldman Sachs. The Deutsche Bank right now is under a massive investigation. That money was then converted back into U.S. dollars, and guess what they did with that money? Then they marketed new financial products to the Chinese. That's quite a Ponzi scheme, isn't it?
Big Ponzi scheme, just like this bailout, what they claim.
The mad-up Ponzi scheme, the whole thing is a complete fiasco. And then you got idiots in the media, like Chrissy Poo Matthews, who says he doesn't even know what a derivative is. And then you got John Howerwood of the New York Times saying it's a good thing people don't know what a derivative is. And he's supposed to be a reporter?
These are
disgrace
with Clinton Crime Syndicate putting out the disinformation.
That's correct, Stu. And, of course, most of these people, as we know, are extortion-friendly, homosexual in the closet types. And people are going to say to me, well, you're going after gays. I said, no, we're not going after gays, folks. Here's the problem. when you got 60 to 70% of the media as basically homosexual lesbians in the closet. If you know your history, you know that Hitler was able to take over Germany, and most of his operatives were homosexuals in the beginning. Why did he use the homosexuals? Because he could blackmail them. Am I right or wrong, Stu?
That's very correct. Just like government officials, the only one that I know that's out of the closet is Barney Frank, and he's already been so compromised and blackmailed and off the charts, it's pathetic. But
you're right.
What they do with government officials, they blackmail, just like Bush's blackmailed all these congressmen and senators with children, and Barney Frank's whorehouse, and Jack Abramoff, the one that's in prison right now, the Israeli Mossad, that was all tied to 911. Again, his whorehouses in Washington, D.C. For what purpose? To blackmail him. Just like what they've done with Patrick Fitzgerald. Patrick, the in-the-closet homosexual U.S. attorney that was supposed to be prosecuting Bush that didn't do it. They got to him. How? Blackmail. Once again, the whorehouses, kids, children, homosexuals, lesbians. That's how they compromised government officials. Am I right or wrong, Tom?
You're absolutely right, Stu. We're going to touch on Fitzgerald in a second. I just want to tie up the theft of the U.S. Treasury funds, the enabling of the theft of the Chinese sovereign funds. That's what they're actually called. And, of course, Clinton's over there in North Korea today simply paying these people. You can count on that, folks. He paid them a large amount of money. His bagman was with him. His bagman's name is John Podesta. He was right there. Now, when it comes to Fitzgerald, he's supposed to be investigating he was, I could spend a whole hour on Kenneth Starr, the other investigator.
Oh, that clown, yeah.
Lobbyist for the Chinese, that was actually a defense attorney for Clinton and Bush, because as we well know, in his investigation, he came across all these documents linked to Mena, Arkansas, and Bush and Clinton and Oliver North and Webb Hubbell and all a bunch laundering narcotics and arms through Mena, Arkansas, on to Honduras. It became a cash cow that was then laundered back through the Rolls Law Firm and converted once again into Japanese yen. It was called Operation Deal Room.
We have the documents right on StuWebb.com and on your blog, Tom.
Yeah, you click on www.StuWebb.com, you'll see the part of the Kenneth Starr investigation that we came under possession. He was protecting Bush and Clinton. Their plan was to frame Al Gore, get him out of the way, so they could give Junior a basically free ride to the presidency in 2000. And then once that was done, put in Hillary bitch right after, and then Jeb Bush. That was their plan, to create a narcotic mobster monarchy. Now, what's the thing about Kenneth Starr is that I've called him many times over at Pepperdine. He's yet to return my call. I said, I want to have lunch with you, punk. I want you to explain why you covered up all these documents on Clinton and Bush. You know what he did, Stu? He changed his phone number. How do you like that?
I don't doubt that. But then again, we got to remember the connections with Starr, his dad, and AIG, that Kenny Starr now basically controls, interlocked with Millman, Bush, Clinton, the AIG crowd, the one we're bailing out. You want to touch on that for a minute?
Why don't you fill us in on that, because you're really I think and then I'll jump in on Fitzgerald and explain to people why he's a fraud. But why don't you go ahead and fill in connect the dots on that, Stu?
Well, it just basically comes down to Kenny Starr, Star International, I believe is the name of it. It's part of AIG, and it's one of the original companies that was hooked to AIG. It's an old spook company his dad, Kenneth Starr, was tied to. And Kenny Starr's up to his eyeballs in this with AIG. And who's on the forefront of the bailout? AIG. Every place you look, Citicorp, AIG, Bank of America. These bond houses are buying all these artificial mortgages. They were all intertwined. And you asked me to touch on, Tom, and I will for the edification of the listeners here. These mortgages are what they call subprime. Is not a bailout of the people themselves. It's what they had done already, and they already took the loot and ran with it from the first bailout. And they're still running with it at $24.5 trillion, I believe is what they're saying now the number will reach, and it'll be much higher than that. And it comes down to a company in Denver, Colorado called MDC Holdings that owns Silverado, owned Imperial Savings, where Neil Bush was director of Silverado, the ones that collapsed the savings and loan back in the 1990s, 80s, and 90s.